Welcome to the Wednesday, April 14th, 2021 Planning Board meeting for the town of Raymond. The board will come to order. We do have a quorum. We'll start with roll call. Ed,
Ed Kranich here.
Greg,
Greg Foster.
Kevin,
Kevin Woodbury.
and Mike.
You're muted, Mike. There you go.
You there, Mike?
Better now?
Yep. And Robert O'Neill. This is a public proceeding, and unless the board specifically votes to go into executive session, you have the right to hear everything that is being said and to look at all the exhibits that are presented. Please notify the chair if you're unable to see or hear. The board works from a published agenda and will be considering tonight's items in the following order. We have two pre-application reviews, one from Karen Crawford and the other from Timothy Clinton. In each instance, the burden is upon the applicant to demonstrate compliance with the provisions of the applicable ordinances. I do not anticipate there'll be any votes taken this evening, and nor are we planning on making any final decisions. So we can skip that part. All right, so our first order of business, I just want to start off with inserting here. I have received, and I know members of the board have been receiving letters from Indian Point residents. Just as a reminder, we are not, the board, we are not in a position to enforce actions. So I have talked with the town manager, and he and Alex are going to get together and respond. I did think it was important that we just didn't leave all these letters hanging, and that they did get a response from the town. So that response will come from, I'm assuming, from you. Is that correct, Alex? Alex?
To be determined, I think.
Okay.
I think that will probably be the course of action. The problem is there's so many letters floating around to different people. I mean, they've sent stuff to you guys, to the select board, to state reps.
I think
at this point, I don't know who's expecting a response. So if anyone's gotten something that they'd like us to respond to, just forward it to me, and we'll make sure that we get something back to them.
Alex, I think the only one that really needs a response that addresses some specific information is the one we just got from Allison Sarna, S-A-R-N-A. I don't think you've seen that one yet.
Yeah, I shared it with him.
Okay.
And Alex, I've already suggested they just send the letters to me, and we'll deal with them from there.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Bob, are these considered official documentation? So that should we file these with the town?
They, yes, we probably should. They should be filed. Yes. And Mary's already been in contact with the Mary Costigan on the legal side to make sure we're all covered.
Right.
Right.
And we'll include her in whatever actions we take.
Yep. Is there anything I forgot, Mary, that we talked about?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. All right. Any questions on the board from that?
So if I can just clarify, so the 4 letters I have, I can just forward to Alex or Mary, just to make sure they get responded to.
Yeah, forward them to Mary.
Great.
Just don't answer them, Mike.
No, I wasn't gonna. No answers coming from here.
Okay, so let's move to the first order of business. Our pre-application review from Karen Crawford. It's a reissue, or actually a re-review of a 2012 application. And I think Alex, I'm going to skip you, Jim. I think go right to Alex. I think you've kind of worked out all the details already on this. Is that correct? So I assumed from your email.
Sort of. I did run this by the town attorney a couple of months ago when I first met with her about this, and I think him and I both had the same opinion, and that was it didn't make sense for her to not be able to at least bring this to you guys and request the amendment. based on the note from 1978. So, you know, he agrees that it seems realistic that you guys can certainly review this and should.
So the last time this came to the board, the stumbling block was that it was all in the deed restrictions, and the planning board doesn't have any jurisdiction of changing deed restrictions.
Yeah, that's correct. There was a lot of discussion about right title and interest regarding the deed. And because of the language in there about not being able to subdivide, it was felt that she didn't have the right title or interest in the application because it was in the deed that she couldn't do it. But anyone can record anything in the deed. So like you said, it really doesn't much matter what the deed says. It really depends on what the plan says, since the plan was approved by the town. And the plan can be amended and reapproved by the town, regardless of what's in that deed.
Okay,
Can I ask, so if there's a subdivision plan that's approved and there's a covenant that restricts in this, like in this situation, is that covenant considered to be part of the plan? Because I'm looking back at the meeting back, I don't know when the heck it was, 2012 or something. And the contract planner at that time, Hugh Cox, said that although the board has a right to change the subdivision, but doesn't have the right to change the legal rights of the other owners. So in a way that made sense to me. Yeah, we can change the plan so that she could do this as far as the town is concerned. But do we have a legal right to change the covenant that supposedly protects the other owners from more development? That would be my question at this point.
Not really. That's actually kind of a civil issue. That would really take place down the road, and there very well could be issues with title if this lot does get split and approved by you guys and then is conveyed. That could come up down the road, but that is basically after you guys. So I think that if this was to get approved by the planning board, I don't think that's the end of the journey. There's probably going to be some legal work that needs to happen on the back end of it. But I don't know that should be, I guess, a hurdle that they need to jump over before the town reviews the amendment request.
So I have two feelings about that, sort of in opposition to each one. I agree with what you're saying. It shouldn't be a hurdle in a sense. Another part of me is kind of like, well, especially if the applicant is aware of exactly what you just said. And the other part of me says, are we creating a potential conflict that could cause bodily harm? I mean, is this guy that she dealt with that came out with a shotgun? I mean, do we want as a town to be sort of promoting something that down the road might lead to something bad?
Anybody?
Hi, how are you?
so Alex, so from the legal side, you are proposing that we should review the subdivision, make a determination as to whether or not we would approve or not a redrawing of the subdivision to include an additional lot, which would be the subdivided lot. And then once the planning board takes action on that, even though it's in violation of the deed restrictions that are currently present, then Karen would be able to go and take the revised plan through the legal system to change the deed. Is that basically?
I'm not sure. I really don't know. I mean, that's definitely an attorney question.
Can I interject for just a second, Alex?
Sure.
I spoke with the land attorney as well, because I've been here for almost 30 years, and this is the second time that I've attempted this. And their thought was maybe not having me have my parcel of land amended, but have me even removed from the subdivision. So if you look back through the paperwork, there's actually a certified letter from the gentleman who set up the subdivision back in the 70s. And he came to the last town meeting with me and tried to change the subdivision, tried to remove my land from it, tried to do whatever he could to he thinking that he was sort of the final go back to. And then after speaking with that attorney, he said if depending on what the town is allowed to do or feels like they can do, I could also just take my paperwork and just go to a judge. And I don't know what that entails. If I take this same paperwork and bring it to a judge and explain my situation and ask, can I have my my land removed from this? I mean, just how long does the subdivision last? For 400 years, forever, never, never, never. And so these 6 houses will always remain 6 houses.
As far as I know, the subdivision doesn't go away. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that the subdivision doesn't go away. What you might be able to do is get out from underneath the covenants of the development, but that's a civil act, private matter. All the town looks at is that you have right, title, or interest to the property. That's our only criteria that we have for looking at land.
Okay.
Does not mean that the board, as Hugh pointed out back a few years back, that the town can't go forward with the review. It's just that, if the neighbors so choose, obviously there could be civil repercussions if it's not addressed or clean for the title company. So we don't get into advising people on their personal relationships with their neighbors or their
right.
But I do think that we have the right to go forward and review this. But from there to whatever you sell or deed or whatever to somebody else, it may come up as a title question.
So if we,
Karen, is the gentleman with the shotgun still a neighbor?
Alex looked up for me, and it looks like he is. I mean, this definitely was many years ago. I don't know him, and I've never actually met him before that day. So he may have been expecting someone else, but he wasn't happy to see me.
I mean,
It may be in your best interest just to have, a conversation through your attorney or something, rather than putting yourself in harm's way.
Right. I absolutely wouldn't go back up there again. Just, yeah.
because this becomes a slam dunk if all your neighbors agree.
Right, and they all did at that point in time, except for the one. And I think, that's the other piece of it, is that now it's been this many years. Am I going to run into, go through all the whole process again, and then one other neighbor decided that they changed their mind? I mean, that's the other piece of it that I don't want to run into. That's exactly why Alex offered, let's sort of sit down and sort of figure out what I need to do. So even if you tell me where you steer me into one direction, I'm happy to take everything and sort of go to the court. I guess I just don't know where I begin, who I talk to.
I think the person that you've been talking to is your land attorney would be the best advice that we probably could give you at this point.
Okay.
You will need to have a survey drawing done for your lot showing the split that you intend to do. There's some criteria within the subdivision. It'd be an amended subdivision plan. Primarily, we're only looking at your lot, and there would be an affidavit that would be recorded saying that we only revised your lot in the subdivision.
Right. Okay.
But from there, we have some standards that you'd have to uphold to meet. The interesting thing about this one, Bob, is that, most of the time we see these covenants associated with a private road situation. This one is off a public street, so I don't know what the covenants, what they were put in place for. It was 1979, and there was probably a whole different zoning criteria back then too.
It just seems to me that the legal side of the issue should be cleared up before the planning board gets involved, because there's anything that we do is going to be subject to the legal side anyway.
Okay, that makes sense.
So it would, to put you through an expense of redoing all of the data we would normally require for a subdivision And
Yeah.
then to have the legal side say, well, you know, this is a no-go anyway.
Right.
I mean, that would just waste more of your time and your money.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
I don't think, I mean, just speaking for the board, you guys can kind of nod yes or no, but I don't think the board would have any problems with approving or changing the subdivision, you know, depending, you know, unless there's something egregious that we wouldn't know about. But I do think we would have a problem doing it without the legal side being clear.
Right. Right.
So that might be I think, and you guys can yell in there, I think that's your first step is with the land attorney.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah, it looks like it'd be relatively straightforward to meet our requirements for the subdivision to, you know, get it changed. So as long as you get the legal side taken care of,
Perfect.
it's straightforward for us.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I look at like you got a two-pronged pitchfork here, and one pitchfork side is the planning board, the other is the civil side,
Right.
and you don't proceed without both sides being clear. So you kind of need, to Bob's point, you need to kind of clear up the civil side, because even if you go through the town, you're going to spend money and expenses, and then you may get stymied at the local neighbor level.
Yep. Yep. Okay. All right. That sounds like a plan. Well, this gives me at least an idea of where to start, where to go from here. So rather than putting the cart before the horse.
Yep.
Yeah. So we'll set something up once that's done. And I've gotten, should I just touch base with Alex? I don't know how long it's going to take, and certainly building something right now, the way that the cost of materials are, isn't going to happen within the next 6 months. But just maybe head back to Alex and tell him, okay, I've got my paperwork, and then sort of start the process again.
Yeah, what I would suggest is that you reach out to Alex, and Alex and I typically meet on Thursdays. So at some point down the road, if you get everything together, we can possibly maybe meet in person by the time summer comes around.
Okay, yeah, that would be great.
Zoom meeting, or we can do a Zoom meeting, and we can kind of walk you through the process once you get your civil side straightened out.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. Thank you for not making me knock on my neighbor's door again.
We don't want that either.
Shotgun.
So he's familiar with everybody, huh?
I think, and I think, Karen, that was pretty much what the board said, if I remember correctly. I mean, last time we went through this, I vaguely remember going through this at that point. And I think that was the major thing with the board at that point was that, we'll get the legal side finished. And I think the most expeditious way at that point was to get all the members of the, you know, to sign off in the agreement.
Right.
And then, you know, that stopped, and then everything stopped. But
Yeah. Right. So since this avenue isn't working, I think it's just best for me to take that legal move, and that way everybody's covered. And then when I come to you, we've got sort of all of our ducks in a row and ready to move.
Yep.
Okay. I appreciate your help, everybody.
You bet.
you're welcome, Karen.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Dustin, you're next up with the Timothy Clinton application.
All right, thanks, Bob and everybody.
Jim, do you need to say anything to start with?
I can. Got my plan here real quick. This property is located in the village R district, and what they're proposing is to create a access off of Clare Lane. Clare Lane is a town road. I'm not sure of the dimensions of Clare Lane, and that's something we can get into later on. But they're proposing to put in here 12 duplexes, 24 units. That does not trigger at this time a loop road per se for the development itself. It might be a question that we might have for Clare Lane, because that's a subdivision within itself as well. The biggest thing at this one will have is kind of a cluster type development with the duplexes. However, they will have public water, which will come off Webb's Mill Road. I don't remember if it was Peter Buskey or McGoldrick that once looked at this property for a different type of development many years ago, but there is a gravel access that cuts up through this lot, comes in through the backside. I believe their intention is to do that to connect to the water in 85 down there. That'll have to be all coordinated with the water district for the appropriate easements and right of way and access and everything. So with that, I would expect that they would have hydrants within the subdivision, but on top of that, our ordinance does require sprinklers. So I'd be glad to hear what Wayne might have to say about that. I do have a few concerns, but I'll let Dustin kind of wrap up anything he wants to discuss about the development himself. I just have some concerns where it comes off of Claire Lane. Obviously, we're very early in the sketch plan process here. So I think we're just talking this out tonight. And Dustin, if you want to add anything to that, go right ahead.
Sure. And then if you'd like, I can share my screen, or if everybody has a plan in front of you, I can just talk through it. It's up to you.
I think we all have a plan, Dustin.
Okay.
Yeah, we're
Yeah,
all
I'm
gonna-
fine. Yep.
All right. Very good. So, yeah, as Jim had indicated, you know, we are kind of early in the planning stages. We're at that point where we have basically, you know, a dozen different parallel tracks of information gathering and preliminary planning for a project like this. So we've been working closely with the Portland Water District on the ability to bring the water main up through this right of way on the adjacent property to serve the project. In order for it to be an 8-inch water main with public hydrants, it needs to be a public main. Otherwise, we would need to essentially just put a meter pit down at Webb's Mills Road, and it would be a service in from there. So we're trying to avoid that, and we've come to some preliminary agreements with Portland Water District where they will permit this to be built as a public water main up through that 50-foot right of way, and then as well as through our project. So that allows us to actually have public hydrants inside the project, and also individual water services for each of the units. One of the items that we're working on is, even though we're not proposing to build out the road from Webb's Mills Road in that 50-foot right of way, we do still need to engineer the road and build it to a point so that this water main installation is going to be installed at an appropriate depth that'll have adequate frost cover for as long as that stays a temporary road, and also doesn't have excessive depth in the future when that road eventually becomes built out as a real road, potentially to access the property that actually, you know, owns the right of way. We have been in contact with the neighbors. It is as Jim had indicated, Peter Buskey had owned the property previously. There was some preliminary planning that had been done on it years ago, even some contract zone applications and things that had been done on this larger adjacent piece. So we've just been reviewing some of that information just to get an understanding kind of how this road potentially could be utilized in the future. So all points, or everything's kind of pointing to this being a public water main as being the best use. There's actually already an 8-inch stub that has been brought into the site in this location. It was actually done when the town had applied for a water service on the town-owned property much further up the hill. It's the property that's adjacent to this one, further up where the cell phone tower is. So the town had planned on potentially developing that as a park with some ball fields at some point, and they contemplated needing public water up there. So they actually had designed a kind of a preliminary plan for a water main to go all the way up this right of way and up to that property. So the water district brought an 8-inch stub in. This in essence is the end of the water main going up Webb's Mills Road. We did have some concerns about water pressure just because of climbing up the elevations in this area. I think we had about 88 pounds of pressure static down in that hydrant on Webb's Mills Road. And just the preliminary analysis that we got from the water district was that in this kind of plateau elevation that we're looking to develop, that we would have what would be required for fire flows in hydrants that we would place up there. So We do need to continue to work with the water district on that, but everything so far looks promising. We've completed a land survey of our piece. The parcel ended up being a little bit smaller than what we're showing here, and it actually, unfortunately, necks down a little tighter in this location than what we had originally contemplated just by reviewing the deeds. So we're in the process of kind of retooling this plan a little bit because we don't have as wide of a connection point between these two properties as we're showing here. So we're going to continue to develop that, and as the discussions continue about access from Clare Lane, we're certainly not opposed to using this as the access to the property if, you know, between the town and the water district and everybody determines that that's the best way to get in. We're not opposed to having this road come in this way, and either not having this connection or having it be some kind of either a utility connection or a potential through road at some point in the future. So certainly open to those discussions. The applicant owns this property, so this backland here with access from the right of way, they've already purchased that. They're under purchase agreement for this parcel that's on Clare Lane. So that one is still, it's within our control to be able to purchase it, but we have not closed on the purchase of that as of yet. So these will all be duplex construction. They're intended for apartments, but they may, some of them be sold as condos potentially, or at least converted at some point in the future. They're intended to be upper scale apartments. They're going to have attached garages. They're going to have porches, likely single story living. So the idea is that it's more of like a retirement community type area with apartments and condos versus just, you know, straight, just market rental apartments with kind of, you know, bare finishes. So trying to make them nice. We have had the site looked at for environmental considerations. So Albert Frick Associates walked the property. This whole area, this upper area, did not contain any wetlands or vernal pools. They did identify this lower area on Clare Lane. This area seemed pretty wet. So while this isn't a hard delineation here, this was their kind of preliminary analysis of a wet area down in through here. Even with public water, septic is still going to be difficult on this site, just given the topography. And we kind of have this limited plateau area right here in the middle where we're trying to site all the buildings. And in doing that, some of these little areas around the back that we were hoping to potentially site some leach fields, they're getting pretty close to the toe of the slopes. And there's the potential for water to be coming down off those hills and not necessarily the best place for septics. So right now, the preliminary analysis is to pump the septic up on top of the hill up here. We'll continue to refine that as we, you know, adjust the layout for the project. And it's probably one of those projects where we'll kind of, you know, design the septic and the buildings kind of at the same time, and we may have to make some adjustments for house locations to accommodate some smaller leach fields in and around the buildings. So this whole development may not be as tight as it's shown right now. We may end up kind of spreading it out a little bit just to make some more room for septic. This is kind of the natural low area that we're intending to utilize for stormwater management. Provided this driveway does come in off Clare, it's a pretty flat grade coming up around this corner, and then it starts to climb up this hill up onto this plateau area. So this is
Justin, I don't think we have the shared screen, so.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So so basically, right as you're coming in that first bend on the roadway, right on the left-hand side there, you'll kind of see a low spot, and that is the kind of the area that we're looking at for stormwater management. So, and where I was talking about before with septic, it's basically in the far eastern corner of the site, getting close to the pipeline area. That's the area that we're looking at potentially pumping the septic up into there, and then yeah, those wetland areas I discussed are down near the cul-de-sac of Clare Lane, down in that, like that lower 100 feet or so of that property where the grades kind of flatten out. Don't anticipate any issues with CMP as far as, we're going to bring underground power up into the site. We will need a stormwater permit with Maine DEP, so we're in the process of working through that with them, just to get a pre-application meeting scheduled and a project manager assigned. So it's still kind of the early stages of that as well, but that'll be obviously a critical component of scheduling and design, working through the DEP approval process. I think other than that, I mean, that's kind of the direction we're going now. Information we've gathered to date. Certainly this being the first time the planning board's seen it and not giving you a ton of information. Like to just hear some of the input that you have and anything that you'd like to see us consider as we kind of work through these design options, and things you may want us to incorporate into the project. Jim, you had mentioned sprinkler systems, and I think certainly like to talk about that. My thought was, with these being duplex buildings on public water with hydrants in the project, that we would not need to do sprinklers. But if that's not the case, then we would certainly need to know that so that we can plan accordingly. But our preference would be to not sprinkle the building, but to instead bring in public water with hydrants throughout the site instead. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the board and staff members and answer what you have for questions.
I don't mind. I think we should just hear from Wayne right up front with regards to the water and fire suppression concerns. Wayne, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
We got you.
All right. Thank you. To answer Dustin's question, if we find that the proposal for the water main provides the sufficient pressure and fire flow, and it's duplex units only, then they wouldn't need to sprinkle where they would have public fire hydrants in the project. But the key is, 1,000 gallon per minute fire flow at 20 PSI at those hydrants. So, and knowing from a project in Wyndham, they had to do a pump station for the upper elevations. So we'd want to see documentation from the water district saying that they can provide that fire flow for this project.
Yep.
I assume Sebago Heights, Wayne.
Some of the things that, and that's the minimum fire flow. What we would want to know is basically what the square footages of the buildings that are proposed, what the square footage is going to be, and the spacing between the individual duplexes, so that we can do a fire flow calculation and make sure that if it that 1,000 gallons per minute is enough. It might require more. I don't think so, but we'd have to do our calculations to make sure that that's true.
Now, I guess one other question I had is, the way we've got this laid out, it's basically a 300-foot long leg of a hammerhead turnaround. I don't know if 300 feet of road that would service those last 5 buildings on that kind of spur road that comes out. If you feel that 300 feet is, actually, no, I apologize. It's about 220 feet to the end of the road from the intersection. If that's back up.
Dustin, I think right now with what I'm seeing, as long as the radiuses for that intersection will allow our 40-foot truck to make that turnaround, back up and make that turnaround, I think that would be fine. The only other thought process is a second hydrant at that intersection.
Oh, yeah, certainly. Yep.
And then, of course, you talked about underground power, which is a concern of ours. And that the power to each of these units has the outside disconnect so that we can shut down the power in case of an emergency. Those are some of the preliminary things that we're looking at this point.
Justin, if I can chime in here real quick on the road too, where you have 10 units off that second leg of road, I think per our ordinance, we would require that to have a hammerhead, just because I think that's going to stand alone as a road to a design standard and probably from a 911 constraint. So it probably makes sense just to put a small hammerhead at the end of that one. I think it just eliminates a lot of questions that the board may have further down the line, because this will be kind of a standalone leg almost of a private road.
Dustin, did you say that there is an option of having this connect to Webb Mills Road? Is that?
So, yeah, one of the things that we're investigating right now is based on the results of the land survey, which is making it not as ideal to connect into Clare Lane as we had laid out on this plan. We're investigating coming up through Route 85, and this may be instead of doing the Clare Lane connection, rather than doing both. It's a lot of road to build to come in and do both, but we can, and what it is where we're showing units 3 and 4, the portion of land that connects parcel A and parcel B, it's only 33 feet wide, instead of the 120 feet or so that we're showing on this plan, which is the best information we had when we were looking at the deeds and the tax maps and stuff. So now that we only have 33 feet, that's kind of tight for just putting a 24-foot wide driveway through there and a 33-foot wide piece of land. What it also does is it puts the road basically where we have units 1, 2, 3, and 4 on that kind of southeastern property line of parcel B. That now becomes, the road runs right along that road, that property line there. So it's not ideal, but that's why we're considering coming in off of Route 85 and then potentially laying the project out so that it could connect in with Clare Lane. We can look at, if it's like pedestrian connections or, unless the board wanted a full connection through there. Certainly like to hear your feedback on all those topics, just so that we can, as we're working through options, know what your expectations are.
Well, I think that just right as it is right now, there would be a lot more traffic being fed into Patricia, which has then exits on to 302.
Yeah.
So I would think for the whole area, if the connection to Clare Lane is kept as some access, and you also have that access into West Mill Road, if that's a possibility, you certainly improve the whole area of development. And if that works into future development, that would be, I think, a huge benefit to be able to have that access both ways. Jim.
Yeah, I agree with you, Bob. I think if we can get the access off 85, it makes more sense from a traffic perspective, because not only do we have this development potentially coming in through Patricia, you have the other project Dustin's representing, the Willies coming in, that would also be an impact to Patricia. So Patricia would go from, I don't know, 10 or 12 lots to all of a sudden, 30 plus, maybe up to 40, lots in the next few years. That's quite a dramatic change. And I think if we do that, the town, or we may want to have the applicants look to see what those traffic impacts could be down at 302 and Patricia Drive. At least if they go down 85, you're not very far till you come to a controlled intersection. with 85 and 302. The other question I had for Dustin, though, Dustin, is parcel B part of anything associated with Claire Lane or that subdivision? Do you know?
I believe it is. I think when that Claire Lane project was done as a subdivision, that was one of the lots in the subdivision. I think it actually is comprised of like 3 separate lots in the subdivision, is all one piece.
Yeah, so just from a legal perspective, I think this, because I know you purchased this, but this would also be an amendment to the Claire subdivision because we were adding right of way or other units onto that original subdivision. So like the one before, I don't necessarily think you need to get all the people to sign off, but I do think it would be an amendment to that original subdivision as well. If you further divide or utilize that parcel B.
Yeah, I mean, what we were going to do.
It'd be done, obviously it's done simultaneously, but I think from a legal perspective, we'd have to consider that in the application process, that this one would be amended as well.
Yeah, my thinking was that we wouldn't be able to develop parcel B. You know, we couldn't just put a bunch of duplexes on it or do something different than what was shown on the subdivision plan unless we come back to the planning board, which is what we're doing. So,
right,
yeah, that would amend those
just during the process, we just need to make sure that we connect and that understand that if we do something on parcel B, technically it's an amendment to the Claire Lane subdivision.
Okay. Yeah, and that,
I also had a couple other things here. If I can, Bob, if you want to just let me go and then the board can deliberate.
Go ahead, yeah.
Taking your power right away from you. I also had questions, Dustin, about septic, and wondering if it is going to be a combined system, if it will be an engineered system. Also, knowing the topography up there, I'm assuming that there'll be or could be a fair amount of blasting that may have to take place, especially if we're putting down this water 5.5 feet below grade. You touched on stormwater. Road conditions was one that I wanted to discuss. Alex and I kind of took a look. Claire Lane, I know it's a town road, but I don't think it meets the standard for that amount of development on it at this point. So I don't know where the board would want to go with this, but obviously we'd have a site walk to take a closer look at the condition, but I think there may have to be some improvements from safety perspective done on Claire Lane. It's kind of a dead end leg in the cul-de-sac. I don't think you could even turn a van around, let alone a fire truck down there. So there may have to be some improvements. If you go that route of using Claire Lane, there may have to be some public improvements to that. Even though it is a public street, I think there's some things that need to be looked at for safety perspective on that. And then obviously you touched on water and exactly that. I know we worked on Sebago Heights many years ago and that required a booster pump. So to Wayne's point, if this is a way to avoid sprinkling, then we got to make sure that we have the adequate pressures to meet the NFPA and all the other fire department requirements. And then I guess I just had questions, and it sounds like this is going to change anyway. I just had some concerns with the placement of some of the units. I thought 1, 2, 3, and 4 were a little close to that first residential single lot development there. I guess if this is going to be a layout that's going to be tight to the property lines, we're going to have to see some landscaping, obviously, or some way to buffer these backyards to these other people's backyards. So I think that's another concern we want to look at. And I know you're looking at this as an apartment site plan complex, straight up conventional, but I didn't know if this is something that the board may want to entertain as looking at it from a cluster perspective where we could retain some open space, or maybe the applicant even may want to offer some open space areas just to be preserved as buffers, maybe up against the gas line or something like that. So I'm just throwing this out, shotgun blast, and I'll let the board go from there.
Unnecessary.
Jim, you sure you're done?
Done. You got it, kid.
I think it's not enough.
Does the from the board, do we have any questions?
Well, I know this is preliminary, but so this is village residential, so each building lot would require 40,000 square feet plus 100 feet of frontage, right? So just based on that, on what I'm looking at, I guess I would need to clarify that that really is the case for each lot. It didn't, to me, it didn't look like, it looks like they're too close for that, but.
Yeah, in this case, it would be more like a condominium where you have one owner, basically. You have a condominium association. So as long as they have an access with legal frontage, either it be on 85 or Clare Lane, they would meet that requirement. So we don't necessarily look at the internal, in a condo situation, we don't look at the internal road for road frontage. We look for the external connection. If that
Yeah, but
makes
I mean,
sense.
and that makes sense to me if we're gonna be a condo, but they're thinking rental units, right? And then maybe they would want to sell one of those sometime. So wouldn't we want to make sure it had enough?
So what?
So I'm
Yeah,
just-
again, it doesn't, I don't think from the town's perspective, it makes a difference whether it's apartment, condo. If they condominiumize them and they sell it, it's the same thing. The condominium association is the overall entity that holds that. If it's an out sale and there's no condo association, then it might be something a little bit different. But that's all in the documentation of how they record this. As it stands right now, it's an apartment complex, and that's the way we're going to review it, probably more under the site plan, but all the subdivision and site plan standards apply.
Okay.
Alex, do you agree, disagree?
No, I think you nailed that one. It sounds good to me.
Yeah, and I can just say that the road that we're proposing to build, it's not intended to be a frontage road with a right of way to create lots. As you said, it's either these units would only be sold as condominium units. So we're not going to try and split lots off or anything like that.
And I do think, Bob, your point that if they could come off 85 and at least have some kind of emergency access to Clare Lane, that may be the best of all worlds. You can make it a pedestrian connectivity, and then you could have it as a fire lane to get through there in the event of emergency.
Yeah.
And do away with that hammerhead. Anybody else?
One way to get rid of it.
I would think, sorry,
Okay.
I would think the water
Okay.
district would want to
Go ahead.
have,
Go ahead, Kathy.
I'm just here as the general public, and I'm not sure if I can speak. My property does abut this.
Well, you're not supposed to, but go ahead, Kathy.
So my property abuts this. I'm on the pole line, 11 Eagles View Drive. My concern is, and I'm glad to see Jim addressed it, is you have 16 properties coming in with a Wiley subdivision. This one adds 24 more. So that's a total of 40 more families dumping onto Patricia Ave. I've lived on Patricia Ave, up off of Patricia Ave for over 10 years. It's a tough road to get out of. And I know when the town was looking at possibly doing playgrounds at the top of Patricia Ave, the concern was the traffic. I really think, and this is not from the fire department, I apologize, I'm at work tonight. This is not from the fire department, but this is from me as an abutter. I really think you need access off in Webb's Mills. Dumping 40 houses onto Patricia Ave is going to be dangerous, and that road is not designed for that. I'd like to be invited to the site walk, and I hope the project goes well. But those are my biggest concerns. Thank you.
You're welcome, Kathy. Go ahead, Wayne. What are you gonna say?
I was just, that kind of goes along with this right of way discussion. I would be surprised if the water district, they'd want a road that they could access this water main to do service on if there was a break or something. So there's some improvements I would think that would need to be made anyways.
Yeah, what they've told us is that their minimum standard is nowhere near what we would need for a road. It's only a 12-foot wide driveway is their standard for access over their main. If we were to build a road, I mean, obviously it would be double that, for what we would do.
Right.
But I mean, based on what I've heard tonight and some kind of kind of the direction we were leaning anyway. I think, you know, we're going to revise our proposal and just come and utilize the Webb's Mills Road entrance rather than trying to push traffic out onto Clare Lane. But I think designing the road so that it at least has the ability to kind of extend towards Clare Lane and potentially even extend a right of way over to it, so that we at least leave the door open for that connection, so that if at some point in the future it makes sense to do that connection, that we've laid it out correctly and that all the infrastructure is there so that it could be done.
I think that's great, Dustin. If we could do that and have that connection, I think that'd be a real benefit for everybody. And I think the apartment complex sitting back there is a great design for that part of the property and as well. So anybody else that want to make a comment, questions?
I'm good.
Good. Ed,
Good.
Kevin,
Yeah,
Mike?
good.
I'm good.
All right. Dustin, do you have anything else?
As far as I heard a couple of people talk about a site walk. Is that something that we need to schedule with the board, and you just coordinate that through Alex, or when do we want to do that?
Yeah, I think we probably will want it. We coordinate it through Mary.
When I send out a butter notices and put the ads in the papers, it will be scheduled on there. I'll be working with all of you to determine when we're going to do that. It should be at least a full week before the meeting.
I think, Dustin, we would first probably want it at least to have some an idea as to where things are going, if you're going to be really changing the plan.
Yep. Okay, so we'll revise the plan and put together what is basically a preliminary subdivision complete application. When we submit that, then Mary will schedule the site walk. Okay.
Yep.
All right, fantastic.
So for the board, Mary, you'll just kind of put that out a little bit ahead of time for the site walk?
Yes, I have time constraints in which I need to make those postings and put the information out, so it will be well in advance. And all board members also will receive the notices of the site walks and so forth. So
okay, I just want to make sure that there's enough of a quorum for the site walk before we get it scheduled.
Okay, I'll coordinate with everybody, make sure we can get them, what date we can get them there.
Okay.
And Justin, I'll throw out the same olive branch that I did to the previous applicant. If you have any questions or run into any stumbling blocks with design or have questions, reach out to Alex and I, and we can schedule a Zoom meeting on a Thursday or another day, and hopefully can guide you through some of those, because you're going to have some other stumbling blocks, I'm sure, given the nature of this land.
Yep. Okay. And we certainly didn't submit an application for the May meeting. So my anticipation is that we'd have something submitted here in the next 4 weeks, and that we would be looking to come back in June for a preliminary review. So that's our intended schedule. So.
Bob, I had a question sort of that Dustin was talking about. The overlays that we have for the property maps for the town are very not accurate, to say the least. When we have an official land survey that takes place, does that flow into the town, and does the town have a process that can update our property maps?
That's a great question, Kevin. We used to have a map project going on, and that was years ago, and then it kind of, I think, just fizzled out.
Yeah, I was involved with that, and the money was, I was determined we didn't apparently need to do GIS, and it's a really terrible issue. I mean, I'm just looking at, because I'm looking at the overlay right now of that property, and I measured on Google Earth, and Dustin probably did the same thing and said, oh yeah, you got 133 feet there or something. But in actual fact, once you start looking at the all the deeds and the documentation that goes along there, it's not. So I think we need to get back something going in this, because people looking at our information that we have on our website for that KMZ overlay, they get a very false indication of where the property lines are.
Kevin, if I can add a little bit to that. I know we made some ordinance revisions, and one of the things we put in there is we wanted some points now that are on the main state grid system to that exact point, so that we can take that plot or that plan later and at least get the CAD file from the applicant, and then can easily drop that into our system. So that was one step we took. Whether or not that's being executed, that might be something Alex knows. I know they were working on some tax maps, but I don't know how we individually update those. That's probably more of a tax assessor question.
Is that Kayla? Does Kayla doing that now?
Yeah, you'd want to check with Kayla on that one. And to be honest, I don't know very much about it. It is on my list of things that I wanted to bring up at some point. I know in Casco, that was the process when we got a survey or a subdivision plan or anything that was substantial, then we would send it off to the mapping company and they would update everything. And so I can check with Kayla on that and see what they're doing. But I agree, it's definitely something, Kevin, maybe if you and I try to push that one in the next 6 months or so, we might be able to get something for next year if it's a money thing. But I think it's important for sure.
Yeah, good. I agree completely.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions, comments? Tim, are you okay? You everything?
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, that brings us to planner communications.
Not aware of anything. Dustin does have an application in for the Willies up there on Patricia Ave. That application came in, so that will be on the next agenda. I haven't had a chance to look at that yet. It just came in. So we do have that project that will be forthcoming in May. So that's the only one that I'm aware of that's on the immediate horizon. I think there's some other things and discussions that have been going on, but we haven't seen anything move forward. We were working or talking with one of the solar farms that was looking to come into Raymond, but to date, I haven't seen anything updated. Alex, I know you and I have been kind of disconnected a little bit, so maybe you have some updates that I'm not aware of, but that's all I've got, Bob.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't really have anything else to add to that. I think there's a lot of stuff going on right now, but short term, I don't see too much more coming in.
Okay. Greg, is that just a logging operation off of 85 right now?
Yeah, that's not mine.
Okay.
I think Reggie Noel is doing it. It's nice though, isn't it? Trust me, my work is just as good or better.
All right. Anybody else have anything for the evening?
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All those in favor? We're done.
Aye.
Aye. Aye and goodbye.
And goodbye.